Is God building a house for me right now?
From what Swedenborg says, yes, which is wild to think that there's a structure being created right now, and we don't know anything about it, and yet it's being shaped by our own thoughts and feelings and actions, and we'll recognize it when we see it.
We're going to look at that in this episode. We're also going to take a trip to visit the houses of people who have been married to each other for thousands of years. I want to see what kind of home they made. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Curtis Childs, Dr. Jonathan Rose.
Hey, Curtis.
Today we're looking at the perfect home that waits for everyone in the afterlife, which is, as you pointed out a second ago, our mind is making it right now. What's going on in your brain and your heart, God is turning that into like your real estate in the afterlife.
It sounds too good to be true. I mean, it's just a beautiful thought. And Swedenborg doesn't say this explicitly, but what I gather is that things like the number of rooms or how tall it is and, you know, what kind of a view or where it's situated has something to do with who we are, like the nature of our minds. One mind is different from another mind. I don't know, I just think that's the coolest idea.
Well, let's look at some examples. This is from his book, Heaven and Hell, where has a whole section on, angels, people that have died and live in the afterlife.
That's right.
Where do they live? What do they live in?
Yeah.
And how's it get there? Whenever I have talked with angels face to face, I have been with them in their houses. Their houses were just like houses on earth that we call homes, but more beautiful. They have chambers, suites, and bedrooms in abundance, and courtyards with gardens, flower beds, and lawns around them. Where there is some concentration of people, the houses are adjoining, one near another, arranged in the form of a city with streets and lanes and public squares, just like the ones we see in cities on our earth.
And partly what strikes me in that quote is that in the spiritual world, in this world, if you want to go to somebody's house, you find out the address, you go there, you ring the doorbell or whatever it is.
Hello.
Or you text them saying, I'm here.
Yeah.
But in the spiritual world, for Swedenborg to be sitting in an angel's house, he has to be in the same state as that. He has to be thinking similar thoughts.
Similar values.
He's adjusted his state to their state. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in their house. He would be somewhere else.
The news from the afterlife, according to Swedenborg, that part of why he said that God gave him these visions was so that people would know a bit that there is a life after death and a little bit what it's like.
Yeah.
I feel like the news out of the afterlife is you would recognize a lot of it. It's not like this world and the way that human beings live in it and the things we build, that just evaporates and means nothing because you're going to some sort of blissful light something. It's a lot like you'd think, but it's also a lot better than you would think.
Yes. And what it's not like is playing harps in clouds or, some of the kind of childish ideas that people have gotten from the literal text of Scripture, but not understanding what those details mean. So no, we're not sitting around all day playing a harp on or glorifying God all day or something like that. He's talking about cities there, right? With some houses have more property, some have less, and all the city squares and where people meet.
Which of course, like somebody's idea of heaven is going to be in a city, and somebody's idea of heaven is going to be to be far away from a city.
Yeah. And it sounds like the real estate is just really good, like many rooms, really beautiful spaces, beautiful gardens and all that.
Oh yeah, and let me give you some more on that. I have seen palaces in heaven that were so splendid as to be beyond description. Their upper stories shone as though they were made of pure gold, and their lower ones as though they were made of precious gems. Their rooms were graced with such lovely adornments that neither words nor the arts and sciences are adequate to describe them. I can just describe
That's cool.
something with science, but
Yeah. It's really cool to think about. In other passages that I've read, he says, he tries to describe some of these objects, and he said, they were just in the form of heaven. Yeah.
you know,
You know how it is.
it's kind of heavenly.
Yeah,
Pick an adverb, heavenly, for heaven Mad Lib. But this next sentence, you start to see a little bit of the difference between afterlife and here.
Uh-huh.
Because he says, on the side that faced south, there were parklands where everything sparkled in the same way. And you might just think, okay, he's just looking up, but that's going to be consistent across heaven. Like the south means something, and the way that your house is oriented, what appears to the south, that is a reflection of what's in your heart and mind.
Right. That's right. That's the area of the greatest light. So the warmth being the east, the light being the south.
The architecture of heaven is like this, so that you might call it the very essence of the art. And small wonder, since the art itself does come to us from heaven.
Okay, there's another hot take. The fact that the buildings that we see and these developments come down from, like architects are inspired by something in the other world.
Yeah.
To make what they make. That's an astounding idea, and would also provide a certain amount of continuity to your experience where you're in this world. Because he says some people after they die, they don't realize at first that they're in another world. That's how similar. And I think that was shocking to people in his time period, to think that heaven, people have bodies and wear clothes and they live in houses and everything we do in this world.
And that heaven drives the culture here.
Yes, that's actually the source, and we're just that's sort of Plato's cave, isn't it? Where it's just a reflection. Our world is just a reflection of this higher world.
You would think, if you just hear a few snippets about, maybe there's an afterlife, seems kind of bland and uniform, but then you have here where there's so much going on, and there's all this fashion and art and architecture. Other way around. What we have here is bland and relatively uniform. And everything cool that we get is like the trend moves across and finally gets to us. And so like Frank Lloyd Wright, I don't know who the best architects of all time are. Whoever it is, the inspiration that they get to, you could make a building like this, or that buildings that end up showing up here, however many years ago, that's already how they were doing it in heaven.
Well, here's a little example that suddenly jumps to mind. We did a show not too long ago about a temple in heaven that had walls that were completely transparent.
Yes.
Like of crystal, quote unquote. Well, now people do that here, but that was like 250 years ahead of its time.
Yep.
Up there, they didn't have plate glass down here yet.
Angels tell me that things like this and countless others, even more perfect, are presented to their view by the Lord, but that such sights actually delight their minds more than their eyes, because they see correspondences in the details, and through their correspondences, they see things divine. So
they don't even care all that much about the carpet or the curtains or,
So it would be like, let's say that you make friends with somebody and they turn into a billionaire, or they go way beyond what your current social circles are. And so you go and visit them and you're like, whoa, they have this insanely big house now, and it's in the prime real estate and everything.
This is automated and that's fancy.
There's my boat down by the dock. But if you got there and they were like, look at this, look at how, and they're like, come here, I want to show you something. And semi-oblivious to the monetary value of it, they're like, look at this arch, see how the sun's going down? That's just like how God reaches into each person's life and does that's what it would be like.
And that's what lights them up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's what they love.
The houses that they have here, they didn't even decide that they would have God decides. It says, I'm going to give you this because I think it's going to be good for your mind and be good for you to do the use that you're going to do. And I'm going to continue to adapt and change it.
And it's It's a gift. It's a gift from the Lord. Like, here is who I see that you are, who you're becoming.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like one of those Christmas presents that you get when you're younger that's like, oh, just a bit beyond where you are now, but you can grow into it. Or something like, oh, I don't see myself that way. But here's this parent who sees, oh, no, I think you can. Soon you'll be at that next level.
Here's your unicycle.
Yeah, that's right.
People who have loved divine truth, this is skipping forward a little in heaven and hell. People who have loved divine truths and the word from a deep affection or from an affection for the truth itself live in the light. If people have given the divine credit for everything, the objects in their houses look like diamonds with similar variegations of light. I have been told that their walls look like crystal and are therefore also translucent, and that within them one can see what looks like fluid forms representative of heavenly things, again with constant variety.
So that almost sounds like what we have now with these giant flat screens and things like that, where you can be portraying something and it's some gorgeous thing full of meaning is shifting along. But who, my friend, thinks about reading the Bible as a way to improve your real estate situation after death? Does anybody think that?
I didn't think. I've got to go get back and get into that thing.
I know.
And this is a great illustration of the impact of the mind on the house. If people have given the divine credit for everything, then they have all this clear stuff.
Yes.
Because clear stuff, what does something that's clear do? Like a window, it lets you see the light source behind. It does not impede the progress of the light, which is like the light is a correspondence everywhere in Swedenborg for divine truth. So if you get to be clear, it's somebody who's letting God through, which you do that by faithfully delivering the right thoughts and impulses to the world through your actions, but also by saying, this comes from God. Don't mistake me. If you had a very opaque window, you might think, oh, that thing glows on its own. But when you can see through it. So that's the way the correspondence works. Why do I have, here you might have art and things in your house because you got money. And you could have got that money doing good and honorable things. You could have got that money doing dishonorable things or anything in between.
Sure.
The money's there so you can buy it. But even buying it, you have to go and find it and rely on supply chains and all that stuff.
And it might not be exactly what you want, or you wanted something else and
Right.
You'll settle for this.
That's how it works in the physical world. However, you do end up with these kind of houses that we're in that reflect the kind of houses that are there. But in the afterlife, it is an inside driven process. So if you have been the kind of person throughout your life to give the divine credit for everything, you will have translucent or transparent stuff in your house. And some of it even that has information and these pictures of the truth of God flowing through it, because that's what really is an image of what your soul is like.
I'd never thought of the fact that the concept that things flow in from God, they don't originate in oneself, translates right into gorgeous windows. But that's what it is, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Light flows in. And so when you have that concept, you live in a house that's full of light.
This is because this kind of translucence corresponds to an intellect that has been enlightened by the Lord, with the shadows that arise from faith in and love of natural things taken away.
Interesting. So a priority thing too. So that's not as important to you. And so those shadows are taken away and then the space is full of light.
And it's not like this is some strange carve out where there's this particular compact in the spiritual world where God will make your house based on what your mind is like. The whole spiritual world works that way. I was thinking
that's right.
that he describes a similar phenomena with the clouds around this in the sky around certain groups of angels.
That's right.
That when there's more of natural and or earthly and self-serving things, there's dark clouds. When you're thinking more and acting more in a way where you affirm the existence of God and you love people and do all those things, those clouds become brighter and more translucent. Everywhere, the landscape, the hills, the animals, everything reflects what's going on inside you, and the house is just where that happens most intimately.
he says that when angels are discussing something and there's confusion about it, particularly if they're talking about something in the Bible, like what does that mean? Then it might be cloudy for days, because they're wrestling with this. And then clarity comes, the clouds go away. It's a very different world. It has the same, has light, has clouds, sun, so all that stuff, but it functions completely differently.
That was the magic trick, is that through God was able to take inanimate, dead, as Swedenborg would call it, matter, which is what the physical world is made out of, and pump life into that through the spiritual, to the point where it's an image of this stuff that's alive, but made out of. It's like Nintendo, video game company Nintendo. They'll make video games, and I think maybe a lot of companies do this, but where they'll say, like, let's say you're Yoshi, who's a little dinosaur, and he's going through and doing stuff, but the whole game is made out of arts and crafts style paper stuff. Like, it's all digital, but it's made to look like some kid made it out of construction paper and paper towel tubes. And they'll do that. That's like what the world is. If an angel came down and saw, they'd be like, you use this stuff to make something that looks like the spiritual world, like a fun little approximation of the spiritual world,
right?
In this stuff,
a little campy, but it's. I admire the effort.
And the main difference is the driver in the physical world is physical stuff. So it's the laws of physics and how much money do you have in your bank account. Whereas the spiritual world,
what machines do you have to shape this material, or what science do you have?
How close to the equator are you? Or that's what drives the climate. But in the spiritual world, it's psychological stuff that drives everything. It is the beliefs and the loves of people there that shape it. So it's a mental world rather than a physical world. And because the homes in heaven are mental or spiritual rather than physical, they're alive. The homes, you could say, in a way, they are alive compared to what we have here.
Yeah.
This is from Heaven and Hell 190. And this comes from the aliveness of spiritual substance. The houses angels live in are not constructed as houses in our world are, but are given to them by the Lord gratis. Is that how you say it?
For free.
Yeah,
that's right.
I was feel like with that word, I'm mispronouncing it. Doesn't matter how I say it. Sounds like I'm being pretentious and mispronouncing it at the same time. To each individual, according to his or her acceptance of what is good and true. So God's going to give you a house, but it's not just like you get a house, you get a house. You get instead of money, there's something different. It's your acceptance of what is good and true determines the kind of house that fits you.
And it seems to me, I don't know, that's something you could have some control over in this world, even if you don't have money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's something you could work on.
Your acceptance of what's good and true.
Your acceptance, yeah, that's right.
And
you could have actually more control over that in a way, I think, than you could over your financial circumstance.
Well, that's your long-term investment, your acceptance of what's good and true. We're going to hear later in this show that you can have a great house here and end up in a terrible living situation in the afterlife, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to want to try to secure good shelter for themselves in this world. And you should, and for your family and all that. Right. Go ahead, try to improve it as much as you can. Also, there's a much longer term investment that we got to make, which is our acceptance of what's good and true. That's gonna determine. I was gonna say what your house is like forever, but not really, because just like the house changes, it doesn't stay the same.
You were saying they're alive, so I want to hear more about that.
This is what I'm talking about. They also change slightly in response to the changes of state of their deeper natures.
Okay, so this is not like being in a house of mirrors or something where it's every second it's, I thought that was the bathroom, and it turns into the kitchen or something.
No, but something like that's a little bit out there. So this is going to Secrets of Heaven. I was sometimes able to see decorative elements, such as those that appear on stairways and main doors. These elements moved as if they were alive and changed with ever fresh beauty and symmetry. I learned that such changes can keep going indefinitely, one after another, even to eternity. And there is a constantly renewed harmony among the variations formed by the very sequence of changes itself.
Oh, you know how when there's a really big, like, blizzard, snowstorm,
Yeah.
then you can, the snow actually shows you the shape of the wind. You don't usually see the shape of the wind,
Right.
but when you see the way it would curl over and these beautiful, gorgeous shapes,
Yeah.
it actually shows you the shape of the wind. That's a description of shapes that are already in our thinking, but we don't know it. And what I love about that is that you can get a little bit tired. Like if you see exactly the same thing every day, it's almost like your eye gets numb. You hardly even see it anymore because it's just the same. So your brain doesn't have to do any work with it. And so the idea that, oh, hey, looks a little different over the door than it used to. Yeah, what is that? Oh, that's interesting. You know?
Yeah, I would think you can you're in the bathroom and looking on the shelf, like, oh, that's changed. What does that mean? You know, like,
Exactly.
Where am I going? What have I reached a new level here?
Yeah, what does that?
So this is going on in Secrets of Heaven. All angels have their own houses to live in. Anything made of physical stone, brick, or plank seems dead to them. But anything from the Lord, or from life and light itself, is alive.
Life and light. Now that sounds NDE-ish, doesn't it?
Sure does.
People describe a
Sure
world
does.
that's just full of life. The bodies, light. I mean, the bodies are full of light. That's cool. The buildings are actually, in a sense, made of light, or you can tell that there's a different substance behind them.
You could say the difference between the spiritual world and the physical world is fundamentally the spiritual world is alive and the physical world is dead.
Is dead.
According to Swedenborg, because he would say even the life that's in you and I and in trees and in animals and
plants and
all of that, the life itself, the force that animates the matter is spiritual. And then as soon as that's gone, all the material around you is slowly decaying because it's dead. Whereas in the spiritual world, everything is alive.
Truly alive.
Such materials are all the more alive because angels experience them with the full range of senses, since objects there are perfectly suited to the senses of spirits and angels.
What does that mean? That's interesting. A full range. So it's not just that you see something, but you can kind of feel it, or there's a a sweet smell that comes with it, or something. It's just what an interesting thing to say, and that your whole self is engaged with its reality.
I do think one headline Swedenborg wanted to bring back from the afterlife when he went there was like, angels they do what we do. They see things. They can hold things and feel them.
Yes.
They can hear each other.
Yes.
They can smell things. They can taste things. That life as we know it, the sensory life.
Eat food.
Angels can't look around and see things that are in the physical world, but they have stuff there that's, while it's more alive, it's just as real and the same kind of process happens. Like something enters their spiritual eyes, something enters their spiritual ears, and you get that it's like amped up. There's
a degree of permanence that I'm thinking about as well, because with our personalities, I saw a photograph at one point of my father when he was, 6 months old, and it was totally him.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see, oh, that's totally him. So there's a kind of continuity in who we are, and so there's continuity in our spiritual building in the same way. And that, for some reason, I don't know, I used to think of the spiritual world as, I don't know, I don't want to say hallucinatory, but just so sort of malleable. Oh, wow, it's all changing all the time or something.
Dreamlike.
And yeah, like dreams, which, as we've said before, you're in one room. My dream last night, I was in some place that was flat, and then the next moment there was this big dip in the driveway, and that, the whole landscape was just changed from one second to the other.
Right.
But nobody seems to go bump. It's all just, oh yeah.
Yeah, you don't notice.
But these things are concrete. The clothes they have in their wardrobes, and the doors and the structures. It's stable, and so there's a small percentage of living change going on. But I'm just as struck by the idea of there being more permanence really than physical houses do, because they outlive us by hundreds of years. But they're falling down from the moment they're finished, right? I mean, they start to decay and
well, speaking of
need
that,
a lot of work to keep lifting them up.
Speaking of that concrete sort of stuff, here's some of the actual architectural details. The houses of good spirits and angelic spirits usually have porticos or long entryways, vaulted and sometimes doubled where they walk.
Now wait a minute. These are spirits and angelic spirits, which, if I know Swedenborg's vocabulary, these are recently deceased humans from this world who have not yet gone to heaven or hell. They're just temporarily in that. They may only be, he says some people are only there for a month. Some are just there for a couple of years or something while they get themselves sorted out. And yet you're telling me that even people in that state have these fabulous porticos?
Yeah. This is what they had in the 1750s.
That's right. Chances are, if it was moving every day, it's not precisely the same right now as his snapshot that he took back then.
The walls of the walkways are formed in many different ways and are graced with flowers and flower garlands woven in an extraordinary manner. These details appear to them brighter light at one time, in weaker light at another, but always offering profound pleasure. Their houses also turn more beautiful as the spirits grow in perfection. When the houses are undergoing change, something representing a window appears at the side and widens, and the inside grows darker. Do you want some details? A piece of starry sky appears, as does a kind of cloud, which is a sign that their houses are changing into even more enchanting ones.
Oh, come on. Now, what is that?
Well,
that is really, really interesting. So does something like that happen in our minds when we're undergoing change? The idea of new window, that's very bizarre, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
New window appears, you can see a star and a cloud out there, and then spirits know, I think I'm going through major transition right. People say that to each other in this world, don't they? Like, this is a time of change for me. Like, I'm at a hinge point in my life and things are changing.
And there's analogies to it. Here we have some situations like this that, you might have when you first get into your house. It might be that your kitchen came from several decades prior, 3 decades prior.
Most of them do.
And, you're like, okay, for a little while, you're like, okay, well, we can't do anything about it, so we'll just live with it. But then I'm finally at a point where I can get the kitchen, someone's going to come in and remodel it, or people do it themselves or whatever. And then you have a transition period there. There's different signs for it. There's somebody's truck is parked in your driveway, and there's like waste bins out there or something.
Or they literally put a sign right in your yard advertising.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a different method by which these upgrades are happening. There's a window. It also reminds me kind of software. And like your computer will say, tonight when you plug this in, we're going to update you to the next.
Keep it plugged in because
update.
Yep, you're getting the next one.
And because it's got that little symbol that's going to do that.
That's right.
It's kind of like, the window appeared with the stars and all that. It's a little darker than here, so at some point we're moving up.
I'm dying to know what that is psychologically. I'm going to have to think about that.
Okay. This is what I was foreshadowing earlier. This is Secrets of Heaven 1631. Some people have been rich during bodily life and lived in stately mansions,
True.
identifying their heaven with these advantages and cheating others out of their possessions by various ruses.
Well, I think that's not good.
Without conscience and without compassion.
Okay.
Okay, so
Not good.
I think it's important to see even here, Swedenborg is saying, and Swedenborg certainly knew a lot of people like this because he was in the House of Nobles, he was running in all these circles, he probably knew quite a lot of people like this. But interesting that he's not just saying, oh, these people were rich. He's saying, I'm talking about somebody who is rich and identifies their heaven with these advantages. That's one part of it.
Yes.
Meaning like, what do I think is the highest good or the most pleasure? It's that I have this opulence.
Like I would be destroyed if something happened to,
this is what...
If it burned down, my life is over because I really identify. This is how people know who I am, by this gorgeous house that I have.
Or even that this is what God has blessed me because this is what he's given me.
Yeah.
So that's in the one hand. And then the other hand is cheating others out of their possessions by various ruses, no compassion. So not just that I'm invested in this and I put my heart in this, but also I'm more than willing to deprive others of their chance at this happiness that I have to keep my happiness going.
Yeah.
That's important that's the kind of person.
That's
and
right.
That's all the kind of stuff
We're
that
not
matters.
just talking about wealth, whether you earned it or inherited it or whatever. He's not just talking about wealth.
Because it's about spiritual wealth, and that what he's describing there is like spiritual poverty. Because you have these things that you've got are worthless spiritually. An attitude that says, "Look at me. The external things are what matters so much." Worthless spiritually. Even the angels in heaven that have these incredibly opulent mansions. Not all of them do. We'll get to that in a bit. But the ones we're talking about right now. They don't set their heart on that. Even there, the thing that's most exciting to them is the portrayal of deeper things. So there's that side of it, and then if you've got this cruelty in you, those are both worthless things spiritually. And in this world, you can get ahead through them.
Yep.
But you're not.
And so, what you get a nice house for 15 years or something, and compare it with eternity.
So if
it's
you
not
take
the be all and end all. It's focusing on the wrong thing.
If you take that into the afterlife, what happens? Well, right away, God's gonna come down on you hard. Am I right?
You're gonna be in a shed.
When they come into the other life, they are first introduced into exactly the same kind of life they had lived in the world.
Oh, I was wrong.
Sometimes they are even allowed at this point to live in mansions, just as they had in the world, since at first everyone in the other life is welcomed as a guest and a newcomer. That's just like you were saying.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's big. Yeah. So they're in the same circumstance of life, even though they were kind of rotten about the way that they acquired this wealth. Heaven says, go ahead.
Well, we're not gonna shock your system. You're used to this. Okay? And then this is how the emissaries of God come and talk to them. In order to avoid exposing the inner depths and life goals of these people as yet, angels show them every favor and kindness on behalf of the Lord.
I don't know. It seems extraordinarily loving, doesn't it? That's real. That's selfless love. When they know, they can see, they know who people are. They know what this person did.
And that you, this person, would have absolutely robbed me blind in the world. But yet...
Give me a second. And I wouldn't care if you starved to death.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean anything to me. I got what I needed.
But it's part of the order of the spiritual world that you make the changes in yourself. Like, we're going to give you the conditions, but eventually what's in you is going to come out and be visible. He goes on. But the scene changes. The mansions gradually fade and turn into huts, which degenerate further and further until they finally disappear. Because in the spiritual world, you go from a state of external concerns to a state of internal concerns.
That's right.
Everybody does. So we all go through life and we have the front we put on and our working mind in life.
Right.
And then there's
our story about ourselves kind of thing.
Yeah. And then there's like the deeper, what you really treasure and what you like are like when no one's watching. And everybody starts in their outer life, so they live similarly in the afterlife as you do here. But then the real you starts to come out. The only thing that ever happens bad to you in the spiritual world is that the real you comes out.
That's the worst nightmare. And the funny thing is that's who you are. You know, it's not anybody else doing anything. The angels aren't dismantling your nice house. And it's just your own inner nature's coming out. And then it is revealed that, oh, this is not how your actual mental house looks. Your mental house is kind of a cheap little hut structure.
It said earlier, houses are given to people in accordance with their acceptance of what is good and true. Yeah. But that's probably not even just like quid pro quo. That's actually the mechanism by which the house is built. God will put what's good and true through a person, and then that creates this thing. So if you're somebody who, again, would gladly, without conscience and without compassion, rob and deprive people of the means they have to live,
and then set your heart on the thing that you got as a result.
Yeah. Is there any acceptance? How much acceptance of goodness and truth is there in that? So they can't build a house.
There's not the love of the neighbor. There's not the conscience. There's not. Yeah.
It's like you show up with a couple of pieces of scrap wood and some cement that's already half hardened and say, build me a house. That doesn't work. So that you can't have the external of a mind of love and truth with the internal of a mind of vicious cruelty and corruption, because eventually not only would you lead people astray and harm them, as you did in your physical life,
yes, right,
but eventually it would cause you great discomfort and pain to have these sort of two parts of you pulling in different directions.
Right, and you can also use it to continue to abuse other people, and they take that away. They take your crayons away when you...
Because you can't make yourself get worse. If you're enjoying this show, I mean, you made it pretty deep into the show if you're watching this ad. If you like this and you're wondering, how can I help this keep going and help it spread to more people so they can get some benefit out of it, there's an easy way to do that. Just make a donation. We have in the link in the description, there's a link. Any donation size helps us a ton. You know, the price of a coffee, maybe you can send it our way. Click that link, help the Swedenborg Foundation produce content like this that we think can change the world. Thanks. So we've seen what homes in heaven were like in the 1750s. Now let's take a look. Let's take a little trip into the past. We're going to look at what are the homes like of people who lived on Earth long ago, and they're still in the afterlife, but often living a life that resembles the one that they lived in the world. So we're going to start with the homes from the people of the Golden Age.
Wow,
the Golden Age. Swedenborg uses it to describe an earliest idyllic time, as do many people throughout history.
Many people. That's right. Classical authors talk about it. Yeah.
And so according to Swedenborg, there really was a golden age, and this is people who lived on Earth in that are now in heaven. This is what it's like. This is the kind of real estate that they live in. This is from Swedenborg's book, Marriage Love, which he goes, it's also been translated married love, that sometimes they keep the Latin title conjugal love.
That's right.
He goes on a tour of the houses of married couples in the Golden Age, the Silver Age. I think in the Bronze Age. I think we'll get to that.
Yeah, I think it does.
So this is from the Golden Age. So an angel guide is talking to Swedenborg here. When these most ancient people lived in the world, they dwelled in tents. Therefore, they also live in tents now.
Wow. So their brief time on Earth has had this lasting effect of like that feels right to them. That's how they roll.
And Swedenborg makes it very clear that these are among the best of all people, these Golden Age people, the qualities that are important in heaven, which is innocence, love, wisdom. They have these more so than even the spiritual angels or the ones that more would fit the descriptions we just heard. They have it, but their houses are really simple. They're tents.
Yeah. And portable, right? I mean, the children of Israel lived in tents for a while there because they were moving all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that these people they're still living in tents.
Yeah. As we went, I saw in the distance 3 boys and 3 girls sitting at the entrance of one of the tents. But when we drew near, they looked like men and women of average height. And the angel said, all the inhabitants of this mountain appear at a distance like little children,
All of them. Huh.
because they are in a state of innocence, and early childhood is the way that innocence appears. Also, note that he says, all inhabitants of this mountain appear. Because he'll talk about the third heaven, the second heaven, and the first heaven. And sometimes you can think of it, if you know Swedenborg well, like there's some different planes of existence, or there's something with a big fence in between. Here's the first heaven. But actually, there are instances of the third heaven scattered all over, second heaven scattered all over. And often, he says, it'll be like this. There's a mountain, and at the bottom is people of the first heaven, first layer of heaven, middle, second heaven. So this is people up on the top of the mountain, third heaven. They all look like kids when you're far away. When you get close, they look like adults. That's because the spiritual world reflects what's in your heart and mind.
Yeah, and so there's a truth to both things. There's a truth to that distant view, that you see the innocence from far away. Then you get closer. Well, the truth is also, these are grown-ups. These are
Fully capable.
These are not children.
It's kind of like being up in an airplane, and you look down, you see a truth about the world. And everything from an airplane window looks really peaceful and really beautiful. And you look down, and it's like everybody must be so happy. That'd be such a great place to live, wherever that is. And there's a truth that the thing is good, but also if you get down on the ground, there's a lot more complexity and nuance, and you got to shovel the driveway. But there's truth to both. I like that. After this, I looked around, and seeing that their tent appeared covered with gold, I asked why this was. The man replied that it was due to the flaming light, which glittered like gold. It shines and strikes the curtains of our tent, he said, whenever we are engaged in conversation on the subject of conjugal love. For the heat of our sun, which in its essence is love, then bears itself and tints the light, which in its essence is wisdom. It tints with its own color, which is golden. This occurs because conjugal love in its origin is the interplay of wisdom and love.
So he's talking about the love in marriage, but again, referring that to love and wisdom.
I was going to say, people will sometimes comment and say, you're mispronouncing conjugal.
Yes.
You're saying the emphasis is wrong on the syllable. Did Swedenborg make up this Latin word?
He did not.
Okay.
Ovid used it in ancient times.
I guess it wouldn't really be a Latin word if he made it up. Sorry.
Yeah, I know some people think he did make it up. The difference is that conjugal, they're obviously related, C-O-N-J-U-G, but the conjugal is technically of or pertaining to a spouse, a conjunx, whereas conjugal is of or pertaining to marriage. It's a related word, but the conjugium is the yoking together of the marriage. And Ovid used it because it had a conjugio, there was something about the rhythm of that word that worked for what he was doing. And then Swedenborg seems to have picked it up from there.
And in a nutshell, it would be what now you might call colloquially soulmate relationship.
Yeah.
Or
so soulmate love would not be
this is like happily ever after. That he said that you can fall in love with somebody and get married, and you're married for a little while on Earth, and then you stay that way in the afterlife. And you're just like your house keeps getting better and growing. Yeah. Your relationship, your marriage keeps getting better and growing.
Deeper,
but the two are intertwined, because of course, this like relationship that's front and center in your life is going to affect how you think and feel about things. It's going to affect where you are. And so here they're saying, your tent is gold. Why is your tent gold? And they're saying, well, this is because of the way that the light is, but the light is its way it is because of the conjugal love we have for each other. And whenever we're talking about it, that makes our tent gold.
And so I can picture this kind of sunlight bouncing off it. Like sometimes when sunlight shines on almost anything, it will look gold, especially late in the day.
Well, the
You'll
golden
get that-
hour. They call it the golden hour, like between 4 and 5 o'clock, depending on the time of year, which is when photographers know. You go out, you take all your pictures during the golden hour. There's one in the morning as well.
Right,
but this is right when, if you're walking through a field of
angle there.
a meadow, there's just amazing shadow and this golden hue over everything. It seems like the inmost heaven, the lighting is kind of like that. Whereas in the next layer down, it's more like the noonday, super
It's
bright.
more like the overhead bright. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So there you have, this is people who live in this innocent earliest time with these innocent little houses that are colored by the goodness of the love that they share.
And it does seem to reflect the way they felt about themselves, in the sense that Swedenborg says that those earliest people hardly even thought of themselves as human. They were intensely humble about who they were, and they loved the Lord, and just everything comes from the Lord. And so, my house is just a tent, but did you see the light? The light is
Yes.
amazing. That it's all coming from outside there.
So now let's move into the Silver Age and see where this is where architecture ramps up. Different kind of people, different kind of mindset, same spiritual world principles at play. This is from continuing on in Swedenborg's book, Marriage, Love, number 76.
And so cool that he got to go, he was so curious, and he got to go to these different places and describe what they're like. The gold and the silver, very different.
So, because in that book, he's trying to learn what's the nature of true married love. What is the ideal of this possible bond, and
what happened to marriage over time.
How to get so messed
in
up.
these different eras.
Yeah.
Because later when it turns into polygamy or what, in later ages. So he's trying to look at what happened here over time.
And as he's going on this quest to try to find out about that, which that's just like, it's a relationship is something about what's in your mind and that's in their mind and your hearts and your commitment and things that are intangible. But what he ends up finding, at least in the parts we're focusing on, is he's talking about the architecture of the houses they live in, because that's a reflection of what's going. That's how do you plumb the depths and figure out what is this marriage love that we had and we lost? Well, you got to go look at the houses. That just proves our point in this show. Our thesis of our own show that we wrote is vindicated by the passages we selected too. So there we go. Marriage, Love, 76.
It's a good system.
Yeah. I mean, we all get rich. They were all palaces. Okay, this is a contrast with the Golden Age. They were all palaces built out of marble.
Marble, okay.
Stone having to do with the intellect.
I'm picturing like ancient Greek or Egyptian, whatever.
Yes.
Right.
In front, they had steps of alabaster with columns of jasper on each side of the steps. We also saw temples made of precious stone, the color of sapphire and lapis lazuli.
Good.
Whatever that is. The angel said to me, they have houses made of different kinds of stone because stones symbolize natural truths and precious stones symbolize spiritual truths.
Totally different building material, completely different than a tent. And the whole feeling is so different. The tent is just simple, easy to pick up and go, nothing to write home about.
You hear
it might be beautiful or have a great vibe in there or something, but you're not sort of overwhelmed. Like, oh, your tent is taking my breath away. But then you get to this second group and it's like, wow, these columns, look at this stone, look at this magnificence. It's very different vibe.
If right now, even, you took the human race and you said, where do you want to live? You can live in a tent or you can live in this palace. There'd be plenty of takers on both sides.
That's true.
There's plenty of people
There's
who would
some
like,
people who want to
I want to live that close to nature.
Back to nature,
I want to
that's
live
right.
simply, given that you're not going to be roughing it and like it's going to be good.
Yeah.
I think you'd find plenty of people who are like, I want to do the tent. And plenty of people are like, I want to do that palace. Even just in the world
And
today.
each one would feel quite alienated by like, I'm not living in that thing with the columns and the...
Yeah.
And the other group would be like, I am sure it's not, I'm not living in a tent.
Leave it
I'll tell you that right now.
We saw married couples here and there in pairs. And since they were husbands and wives, we waited to see if we would be invited in somewhere. Even as we had this in mind, so they're being polite, even as we had this in mind, moreover, as we were passing by, 2 of them called us back into their house. So we went up the steps and went in. They then replied, "We come from peoples in Asia, and the focus of our age was the pursuit of truths by which we acquired intelligence. This pursuit was the focus of our soul and mind."
Yeah, and I don't know whether it's worth pointing out, but Asia is one of those interesting terms that Swedenborg can sometimes mean by that something more like what we might call the Middle East.
Yep.
You know, not necessarily far east from a very Western point of view, but
Sure.
yeah. So I don't know exactly where he means. There's
Yeah.
one point at which he even says that there was an ancient word that was used to be in Asia, and it's no longer there. Seek for it in Great Tartary, which is China. So it's like, I thought China was Asia. You know, like,
Yes,
what are you
okay.
talking about? But it shifts.
All we know for sure is that these are non-Europeans
Non-Europeans.
and from the Americas or something.
Right,
You know,
right.
like, it could be Middle East, could be Asia as we now call it.
Right.
But
The big.
I never knew. I skipped
area.
over that detail. I didn't realize that the Silver Age people, because I've read this story before. Okay, all right, and sure, that's one thing. You come from Asia. The thing that means something is the focus of our age was the pursuit of truths by which we acquired intelligence. So that is showing up in everything's made of stone.
That's why it's all
Because stone is truth.
structural,
Yeah.
monumental
Yep.
kind of. Yeah.
The husband showed us into an anteroom outside the bedroom, which had a number of works of art on the walls and little images apparently cast out of silver. I then asked what they were. They said they are pictures and forms representing the many qualities, attributes, and delights which have to do with conjugal love. These ones here represent the unity of souls. These other ones, the conjunction of minds. The ones there, the harmony of hearts. Those over there, the delights arising as a result.
Huh. So interesting, huh? Have little sculptures that represent these different features, and it sounds like they've got them organized. So, of course, we have the soul bond ones over here,
Yeah.
as anybody would.
It would be a faux pas.
But we put the delight ones over here. And
Yeah, so you've got to display, like these are 2 people who are living together trying to have this conjugal love, or maybe they got it pretty strong, and they have this little display in them of this is just kind of reminding you or inspiring you of this is what you're trying to do, this is where you're going, and they're made of silver, which this is the Silver Age, which means it's a more truth-focused way to approach that, whereas in the ones we just talked about, they're saying, oh, when we talk about our married love, it's gold and light on this tent,
Yeah.
because they have a different approach to it.
yeah, and even their bedroom is complicated. Like, it sounds more like a primary suite kind of
Yeah.
thing, because they've got this ante room out there where they have art and things that sort of remind, they're marriage related conceptually.
Yeah.
Out in this room before you actually go into the bedroom itself.
While we were looking, we saw on the wall a kind of rainbow consisting of 3 colors: purple, blue, and bright white.
Oh, just like most rainbows that we're familiar with.
A kind of rainbow. We saw how the purple color passed through the blue and tinted the white with a purplish blue hue, and the latter color flowed back through the blue into the purple and raised it into a kind of flaming radiance.
That's just like our set right here. Right? Doesn't this
Look
pass
at
through
that.
the blue? Doesn't
Look at that. And I don't know if it's a static, like it's a picture that indicates motion, or if it's actually moving on the wall.
It's hard to tell, isn't it? Because it sounds very, motion based.
Yeah. So then the husband said to me, "Do you understand it?" You get, so like show him this. It's like show him this piece of art. You get it?
You get it?
And
Because there's the purple going through the blue, right?
Yeah,
Am I right?
And Swedenborg's like, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Actually, what he said, I said, instruct me.
Yes, that's a polite way to listen to me.
So, isn't that cool? Don't you get it?
Yeah.
Instruct me.
Yes, right.
Like, can you actually
I'd like to hear you put it in words.
Yeah, like I get it. And,
Sure.
and you want to just say it just for my
you just
readers?
Want to be the one to say it? Yeah.
So he said, and this again, I feel like it's worth noting that the art has significance. You want to call it religious significance?
Yeah.
The art here is doing something. It's a useful art. It's focused on heavenly things. I think you can sometimes people, especially if you get the means to get whatever art you want, but even you just kind of like, okay, well, we got to have some art on the wall. You want it to be arty there. There's much more of a focus here because it's the mind displayed rather than just what are we going to put on this wall?
Yeah.
What can we afford, or what strikes my fancy right now? So he said, the purple by its correspondence symbolizes the conjugal love of the wife, the bright white, the intelligence of the husband, the blue, the beginning of conjugal love in the husband's perception from the wife, and the purplish blue, which tinted the white, conjugal love then in the husband.
Whoa.
And I just knew that the first time they said, like, okay, it's a little on the nose.
I just thought that's probably what that was.
Okay, I'm going to finish this, but then maybe we go back and pick it apart a bit so that I can understand exactly what it's talking about.
Yeah.
This latter colors flowing back through the blue into the purple and raising them into a kind of flaming radiance symbolizes the conjugal love of the husband flowing back to the wife. Things like these are represented on these walls whenever we reflect on conjugal love, its mutual, progressive, and simultaneous union, and then look closely at the rainbows exhibited there. It does move.
It does move.
It's not always like this. When we're thinking in a certain way, then we see this thing there.
And then you see it coming back from the white into the purple. And it makes me sort of, I don't know, I have sympathy for Swedenborg. Because on the one hand,
poor guy,
he gets to go up to these amazing places that how many people have ever seen those things while they were alive in this world?
Not just the afterlife,
not a long list.
The heaven of the Silver Age.
Going back thousands of years to these people and seeing their homes and talking with them and seeing these gorgeous things and then thinking, and I have to write this now.
And knowing.
And who on earth is going to... What is he talking about? You know, that this comes from the wife does this and then the husband's thing does that and then it goes back this way
and back into a Europe and world at the time that largely panned what he wrote and mocked him for it. Some people were into it, but in general, Kant and those guys gave him a hard time.
It seems like from my just limited study of the 18th century that generally the lower classes would marry for love because you didn't have much money. And so they would have more sort of stable family lives and they would have children, which you sort of, a lot of kids too, because just staying alive,
economics,
all hands on deck kind of thing,
yep.
Or to take care of you when you're old and stuff like that. But the upper classes were pretty awful in terms, you know, well, that's the wife because that was arranged by the King of Spain or something.
Yes,
and
right.
But I've got the mistress over here, and then the other one over here, and then and I get the idea from some things I've read that some of the lower classes would look at them with envy, like, oh, you get to sort of be wild like that. But so some of Swedenborg's readers are like, really, just a couple together for thousands of years, you know, it would freak them out. Just even the idea of that's not the life that they were experiencing.
That's funny because Swedenborg will hammer Europe, saying that the people in Europe are perverted compared to the rest of the world.
Yes,
your sex lives are degraded and out of control.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting that it could well be, especially he's talking about the circles that he ran in.
Yeah.
Like the upper crust, the nobility of Europe, there's all kinds of bad things flourishing there.
And you do read about some of these kings and queens. It's it's pretty amazing, you know.
So he's trying to say, look, you're missing the boat. You're missing the point. You want to have a really nice wall art. It comes from this the loyalty, the commitment,
devotion,
the interplay. So
right, and this really profound love where you just can't get enough of this person. Like you're more in love now than you ever were.
So this is how that love works. Nobody asked for this. Nobody asked us to just labor over the details of that, but I right now want to talk about this. So either they'll edit it out or you can skip forward a few minutes, you know, like we'll get back to, but let me just talk about this, please. The purple by its correspondence symbolizes the conjugal love of the wife. So conjugal love is this love for two people to essentially become one life together. You stay two people,
right,
but you want to get closer and closer in heart and mind.
And it's particularly because of, in some way, embodying love and wisdom.
Yes.
So that duality, bringing that down into a personal relationship.
Okay, so purple is the conjugal love in the wife. The bright white, the intelligence of the husband. Okay, that's easy to understand.
Okay.
The blue...
And intelligence generally also means like the degree of understanding or like...
Yes.
His worldview, like his thought structure.
The blue, the beginning of conjugal love in the husband's perception from the wife. Swedenborg elsewhere says that this conjugal love actually doesn't come into men. It comes from God into women.
It's a little bit foreign to the male of the species.
And then, so here it's saying, because the husband's starting to get something of it from his wife. And so he's got this blue. So at first it's just his intelligence and her love. And then when he starts to, I'm starting to get something of this.
Something more purplish, but not all the way to purple.
So that then
missing some of the red in there, but.
And the purplish blue, which tinted the white, which was the husband's intelligence, conjugal love then in the husband. Okay, so we got this fire started. We got this fire started. This latter's color flowing back through the blue into the purple and raising it into a kind of flaming radiance symbolizes the conjugal love of the husband flowing back to the wife. So even though the wife has got it in the first place, and she's given it to the husband, but then as he gets it and mixes it with his mind, and then it goes back,
cranked up
then the
way.
whole thing goes higher than it could. Oh, I never even thought about this. Then he goes on. So that's what it's showing on the wall. It's like this is showing here's the steps in which we go further into love. That's on the wall there. Okay. So that's the Silver Age.
Good.
Let's leave it there. You want to go to the Copper Age?
Yes, I do.
Of course. Everyone watching is like, I never agreed to go on this journey, but I can't close the tab. From what tab is this playing? How do I stop this? How to turn my phone off? This is Marriage Love 77. From a watchtower, we saw a mountain rising to the clouds. And this is, again, Swedenborg's on a different journey. He's with an angel guide. They're going to this other place.
And so sort of Lord of the Rings to have a tower. I don't know. Cool.
I'm just saying. Well, those people. If people's ideas for buildings come from the spiritual world, wouldn't people's ideas for books come from the spiritual world as well?
Right.
That maybe the persistence of things like fantasy, sci-fi, things that don't exist in the world, but just people keep wanting to write about them and stuff.
The world of Lord of the Rings is just amazing. And it's got a whole history of these people lived here and then they went there and what the people are like and everything. I know. Did that not come from somewhere on the other side?
And between us in the tower and that mountain, we saw villages after villages.
I love that somehow. So you're up in a tower and you look out at this huge mountain that's got clouds and so tall. And then there are all these little villages down in the valley.
with gardens, groves, and fields in between. When we passed through the villages to the mountain and ascended, we then passed through the villages to the mountain and ascended. And lo, at its summit was not a peak, but a plateau. And on it a city widely extended and spread out. All of its houses, moreover, were made out of wood from resinous trees, and their roofs out of wooden planks. So we're talking about the Copper Age, which is, and so instead of going all the way up a mountain, it's actually a plateau. So we stay lower down. We've gone from tents to stone to wood.
Yes, and I might even say something like pine or cedar or,
Yep.
Swedenborg has this whole sort of hierarchy of wood in what he talks about, and this is kind of a few rungs down in terms of the wood. And I know that for people who, there's lots of houses built of pine now because it grows incredibly fast.
Right.
But there are just issues, right? More flammable or less dense and lighter. That's great. But yeah, it's just
Smells
interesting
good.
to think about. It smells good.
Is cedar pine?
It's not pine, but it's an evergreen.
Is it is it a resinous?
I think it is. I think it is resinous.
It would fit under because I know that when you
I know a lot about trees. You can tell.
No, so some trees have leaves. You understand?
That's right.
Some have pine needles.
And others have those leaves that are just straight,
yeah.
but they don't fall off.
So even cedars have pine needles, even though that. All I'm trying to say is there's amazing. If you've been around something that's built out of cedar, it smells awesome.
It does smell
You
amazing.
love it. You love being
people
around
have
it.
Cedar closets just to keep the
They
moths
do.
away. And
They
everything.
do.
And
So-
saunas are often made out of cedar.
It's good and it's necessary. These different layers of heaven are there's beautiful joy to be found in each different species of joy.
There's a level of delight at that level.
And
That's
if there was no wooden house heaven, the marble stone heaven couldn't really exist. Same with the tent heaven. Like they all depend on each other. No,
Yeah.
It's just like saying, what's better, the skin or the muscles?
Yeah.
Go ahead, take one away and see how the other
Yeah.
does.
See how it. Yeah. Either one. Pick either one you want.
I asked, why are the houses here made of wood? The angel answered, because they're just made out of wood. That's what you would think. What do you mean, why?
That's what we had here.
People like it.
Not much stone in these parts.
The angel answered, because wood symbolizes natural goodness, and the people of the third age on the earth were in this state of goodness. And because copper also symbolizes natural goodness, therefore the age in which they lived was named after copper by the people of earlier times.
Yeah, and kind of interesting that they don't have copper houses, which I don't know if that's even a thing, but you have copper roofs or things like that sometimes. But
Oh, yeah.
but interesting that they went for wood because it has the same meaning. So again, structures are meaningful.
Well, and even apparently those houses would be built by the same mechanism, which is gratis.
That's right.
The Lord makes them.
So good.
But yes, well, I got a pipe now. Makes them through the agency of the mind. If I take divine essence itself, and like those Play-Doh things where you push down and the Play-Doh comes through whatever shape, a star shape or a circle, like those old kids' toys.
Yeah.
If I take divine life itself, Play-Doh squeeze it through the mind of the people that live in this heaven, you get these wooden houses. And the people there love that kind of building material. They feel at peace there. They find their greatest joy
That's
there.
their home. They don't want the big ornate thing. They don't want the tent.
Yeah.
This is kind of an in-between option, right?
Yep. Okay, so that's the end of our journey into the past. So we've looked at angel homes in what was the present in Swedenborg's day.
Yep.
We've looked at them from the different eras of human spiritual growth. But for you right now, like there's some house that as soon as you or I pass away, or anybody watching this show, you're going to have a process whereby you get to that place. But you might be wondering, well, do I put in my phone for Google Maps? How do I get to it? How do I know it's there? By what process do I claim it?
You don't apparently just wake up there.
Yeah.
You're not there.
So
You're somewhere else, and you need to find it, which is interesting.
it's just fun. Yeah, it's the spiritual world seems to, in this funny way, it's very ordered. Swedenborg will describe it like this is what happens. The Lord does this, he sorts that out. The Lord does that. And you might think you show up in the afterlife and there's just this giant God there who's picking people up by their shirts and putting them in places, and it's just on rails, as they say. But actually, even though he says that's like the reality of a lot of what's happening, it's very freeform when you get there. Even angels will say, if you say, what should I believe, or how do I get to heaven? They say, we can't tell you that, but just so you know, if you believe this and love that, you'll go that way. If you believe this, there's this interesting juxtaposition.
Yes. And it seems to me that this is the process that aren't all these self-help books and all this other material, aren't we all talking about finding ourselves or finding our authentic self?
Yes.
Like we don't just start out there. We don't even know. We're not born with an owner's manual, and we don't really know who we are. And so there's this voyage of discovery. And how amazing would it be? We're already going through that in this life, but how amazing would it be to actually be on a physical journey to find that, to actually have that journey externalized in pathways and hills and mountains and fields and meadows or whatever.
Here's what that's like when it happens. This is from True Christianity 6:22. People's preparation for heaven occurs in the world of spirits, which is midway between heaven and hell. Once the time of their preparation has come to an end, they are all seized with an intense longing for heaven.
Oh.
So
it's a longing.
Yeah.
It's not sort of like, sorry, it was a 1 month lease.
You got to get there.
What can I do? There are other people lined up.
So you can tell you have some sort of preparation, which is where you get sorted out. You figure out who you are. You get rid of the things that don't jive with your core character. You get some clarity and all that. And the next step is you feel like, man, I want to go to heaven. I want to get to heaven.
I want to be there. I can taste it now. Like searching for this all my life.
Yeah. Soon their eyes are opened and they see a pathway to a community in heaven.
Like it was there, but they didn't see it.
They didn't recognize it.
So their eyes, it's like those biblical stories where, is it Elijah is out in the wilderness and he's starving, and then an angel sort of points out that there's a whole jug of water right next to his head. Oh, didn't see that there.
They take this pathway and make their ascent. At the top, they come to a welcoming, open, it's heaven, come on in. They come to a gated entrance with a guard.
Oh, no. Heaven's a gated community. Is that what you're telling me?
So interesting, too, that I talked about the juxtaposition of freedom and order in the spiritual world. And there's also this juxtaposition of love and order. Like we read earlier in this show about how even if you were someone who is totally miserly, you would steal from people, harm them, do all that stuff, angels will still just welcome you and do everything they can for you, and this is great. However, they will not say you can come up into this community of people who are not like that, because you'll do all kinds of damage to these people.
Yeah.
Swedenborg comes.
It's not a free-for-all at all. That really struck me.
Even those ancient heavens that we read about, the houses there, you remember from a few minutes ago. If you all skipped that part when I said you could skip it, now you're paying the price. Even there, we didn't read this part there, but in a few of those instances, there's a guard. There's some kind of guard mechanism, and they'll look at Swedenborg, and it's not who you know or what circles you run in, but what it is they look at what kind of love and beliefs do you have, and if you have something that's nefarious and evil in you, or something that goes so counter to what this heaven is about, that it poses an imminent risk to it, they'll say, you can't come in here till you get that sorted out.
The best ID you could possibly have is yourself. And so the guards are able to just look at you and see, okay, you've got a purpose outside of yourself. You're doing this, the Lord had something to do with you being here. Okay, sure, come on in.
The guard opens the gate and lets them in. Because remember, this is a person who belongs in that community. That's why they had the longing to go to this community.
Right.
They're being guided by the divine there. If you were somebody...
here you are going home and...
Yeah.
Right.
If you were somebody else who's just like, you know what, there's a bunch of suckers in that heaven that I'm going to go swindle or...
Right.
Then you're not going to be able to get through. Then someone stops them for questioning, like papers, please, or something, and passes on word from the governor that they are to go farther into the community. And
there's also this sense of instantaneous communication, a lot like in gated communities in this world, where there's somebody you can got radio or cell phone or whatever, but just hey, got a so-and-so here. Is that? Let them in.
They're on the list,
and then you've got the go ahead.
And I think it's different for someone who has the intent to live there versus someone who has the intent to visit. Because you do hear about, in other places he describes, people wandering through different communities in the spiritual world trying to find their home. And they're welcomed in each one, but eventually that person realizes, this is not for me.
This is not quite it. It's close, not quite it.
Then someone stops them for questioning, passes on the word for the governor that they are to go farther into the community and look around to see whether there are any homes there that they recognize as their own.
Now that's amazing.
The governor doesn't know. He doesn't know.
No, he doesn't know.
He just knows, somehow he can tell from God or something, yes, you qualify to get let in, but you've got to go and tell. We can't tell if your house is here. You've got to go in and take a look.
And go farther in. And so that seems to come from headquarters, from the leader. Say, go farther in. And then what an amazing thing that you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you look, okay. So you must have different thoughts and feelings about what you see there.
Yeah.
What a process.
There is a new home for every newly arrived angel. So it could even be like, we know we've got 3 houses. Like at some point, someone new is going to come in here. Are you that person? If they find their home, they stay there and send a report back to that effect. Like,
thank you, I got in.
I'll see you at the next town hall.
Right.
If they do not find a home there, they go back and say they did not see one. In that case, a wise person explores whether the light they have agrees with the light in that community, and especially whether the heat they have is the same. So there are wise people. So it's interesting that the leader and the wise people don't know. You'd think they would just, okay, it's on the clipboard. Oh yeah, we're expecting so-and-so. They're down here on the left, that new development that's coming up over here. And no, they don't know. But they know enough to know what light you have in you and whether that matches, okay, I see your light. Yeah, it's not quite a fit. I can see why you thought it might be. Yeah.
It's close. You're close. And keep going.
There's a bit of an honor system thing about it, because at first they say, go in there and check it out. They could have done that examination process right away to see,
that's right,
can you fit in here or not? But they say, to go in there, you'll know. If you find it, you can stay there. But only if you come back saying, I didn't find anything.
I didn't find it.
Then
I
they'll
walked
see
through the whole town.
Like,
I didn't see it.
Is it true that maybe you couldn't have your heavenly home here? Let's check you out. So that's fascinating. Then it goes on. They leave and travel along pathways that are open between communities in heaven until they find this is what I guess what I was referencing before. Until they find a community that is in complete harmony with the feelings in their hearts. So
So sometimes you can be, and doesn't this happen to us in our lives? Sometimes you can be somewhere that's a pretty good fit, and you might not even know. Maybe it doesn't get any better than this. Maybe this is as good as it gets. But then to have some wise person say, no, I think there's a better fit for you. Keep searching.
Yeah.
But it's on you. So you wander, go here, go there, and then you find some place that's like, oh, I see now that was a bit off. Like 3/4 of myself was there and connecting with what was going on, but there was another piece that wasn't represented.
Complete harmony with the feelings in their hearts. Just like you're looking for a house that's in complete harmony with you, and that's within a community that's in complete harmony with you. So it's like everything will line up. This doesn't have to be a feature in the afterlife, but it is. Which definitely mirrors and matches with some of the deepest longings in human beings. As you want to belong somewhere, you want to be among people that you feel like you love, you want to live somewhere that you love, and have that, like, how cool that the reason you have those longings is because that's your destiny.
It's really moving me right now, the New Testament statement the Lord makes that I go to prepare a place for you. You know, this is very personal.
I love...
Like I'm going to... And this is another amazing part of this whole topic, is that each of us has our own sovereign spiritual territory. We are exactly this feeling, exactly this understanding. Not that we're limited to that. We can keep growing. But there's a little piece of spiritual space that's you and nobody else. I mean, it's amazing.
For some reason, I always loved that line in the quote you mentioned, where in my Father's house are many mansions.
Many mansions.
The next thing he says, in between the statement you made and what I just said, is, if it were not so, I would have told you.
I would have told you.
Even saying that now, I get little goosebumps. And I don't know why. It's not like that. There's not really much information in that. It seems almost like a throwaway line that you could have edited out. Okay, why do you need to say that? But something about it, I just love it. I just love the feeling of it. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, it makes me want to cry. I would have told you. It's something about, you can trust me. If that wasn't the case, I would have told you. I would have been looking out for you out of that. And I know that Swedenborg says the spiritual meaning of statements like that, which are just thick with meaning, sometimes you only get it through the emotions that it conjures in you. You can't understand what it's saying, but you know it makes you feel a certain way. I have a couple lines in the Bible that are like that, which it's not like the sentiment blows me away, but something about them just pulls my heart. But that's one of them. If it were not so, I would have told you.
Yeah. And I think that's true of everyone. The Lord goes to prepare a place for us.
That is their home forever, because they are among their own people, who are like relatives and friends that they love with all their heart because they share the same passions. There they experience the happiness that makes them most alive, and their hearts fill with delight because their soul is at peace. It's not so bad.
Not so bad. Yeah, the thought that there's somewhere where you belong. And Swedenborg describes elsewhere, he hints at it there, but he describes elsewhere that when you see these people, you feel like you've known them all your life. You know, now and then we experience that in this world, where you meet somebody, and after 5 to 10 minutes of interacting, you just feel like, I know exactly who you are, you know? Like, I really relate to the way that you look at the world and the way you think and all that. And so,
there's a song,
and that's what everybody in that community feels like to you. It's like, oh man, where have you been all my life?
There's a song by a guy named Phosphorescent, and it's called New Birth in New England. And I have my own, and I don't know if this is what he meant when he wrote the song, but he's like, he's in a bar, he meets this lady who's playing the piano, and then and they kind of strike up a conversation, and the chorus is, she said, "Don't I know ya? Don't I know ya? Honey, don't I know ya?" And as far as I can tell, the next verse is about the birth of their first child. But I'm just saying, like, that's how I interpret it. The line of "Don't I know you" means like, aren't we meant to be together? Yeah. And that you have that not only with, you have like your true love, and you're meant to be with them. They're the perfect person for you. You also have your true community. Yeah. It's like, these people are exactly who I'd want to be among. And then you got your true home. That's the journey of life that we go through, where you feel like you're out in the rain. You talk about the Lord of the Rings, and they're like always walking through all these fields and
tramping through these
miserable on this mission to go try to fight this big evil guy. And you're going through this journey of life to know that there's a home you get to. And heaven is this interesting mix of, oh yeah, this is the only place where I really belong. These are my people. Actually, other people who are in heaven are really great, but they're not my people.
Right.
However, everyone in your community with you loves the rest of heaven more than you even love each other. So the only reason you're not a community that just forget the rest of the world, we only care about each other.
Not insular, no.
That any of you, the thing that drives you in life is to do service to the rest of the human race. That's the difference between just what Swedenborg would call a society of friendship, which is actually negative, where it's just us, all we care about is us,
right.
And then what it is to be in heaven, where you're with your group and you love them and you can't feel at home anywhere else, but the purpose of your life is to help everyone.
And in some of these communities, Swedenborg describes tremendous variety. Like you wouldn't even think, I don't have any friends who are like this or that, you know?
Yeah.
But because there's a useful function that you perform for the whole, you're like a certain gland or something, you know, something in the human body, it takes a variety of people to do that. But you all have the thing that you care about.
Yeah.
You know, like entertaining people on YouTube, you know, something like that is what draws you together.
Okay, this is Divine Love and Wisdom 134. We're going to close out our talk here today. Angels, unlike us in our world, know their homes and houses no matter where they travel. Birds and animals have this kind of knowledge by instinct. They know their homes and dwellings instinctively, as much experience testifies. Thinking of birds of the air and foxes of the ground, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. This is a clue to the nature of the spiritual world, since everything that happens in the physical world is an effect, and everything that happens in the spiritual world is a cause of such effects. I before was saying a relatively mild statement that human culture is driven by heaven. So the ideas for the architectural movements that happen here come from heaven. What he's saying here is that even the fact that geese fly south for the winter, there's an influence from the spiritual world on that. And that the reason is because in heaven, the people know where they belong. Just like here, the animals know where they belong and the people have to figure out where they belong. So something about even the way that the birds are doing what they're doing is a reflection of this state of heaven.
The squirrel knows to make a nest up in a tree, whereas another creature, you know, does something. The deer sleep on the ground.
Monarch butterflies make this journey over generations that they know we got to go from
5 generations
the big forests in Mexico where they overwinter up all the way into Canada. And it's amazing. That's the kind of precision. Oh, you hear about dogs.
And they know their home. Yeah. Right. You have dogs that'll go 1,200 miles and find the spot that their home. So it's that kind of journey, isn't it? And we're on that journey. And it's very encouraging to me to think that, this has a really, really great end. This crazy life that we're in. Yep. And this quest, this search of like, I don't understand who I am. I don't understand who other people are. I don't know what we're doing. Like, what's the point of my life? Where's this thing going? And the idea that, there are going to be answers to all that.
Well, it has to be more good than bad. The life thing. If the theory that is being proposed is that God is a good person.
That's right.
That God is good, and
despite all appearances of the contrary.
that God is good and is going to create people that are as sensitive as we are as human beings, and it's saying it's worth all the suffering and tragedy that we endure on this journey that we're on. It would have to be that the end state is so good that it's all worth it.
Yep.
And that actually, Swedenborg says that the way you can trust providence is not to say that things don't hurt and that you're not going to have miseries and things, but that God is leading it to a good end, and that everything that happens in the meantime contributes to the goodness of that. So all the time you spend in this world, I'm not saying that this is the way God would do it if humans had never messed things up with their free will, but all the experience you have of feeling like an outcast and a stranger in life, and feeling like I don't fit in, maybe I don't live where I want to live, maybe I don't have a good community that I want to have, maybe I can't find a good romantic partner. All of that like feeling of being out in the cold that you have in life, it makes this homecoming that much more meaningful and powerful. You understand what you have in a way that you never would. And that, so every state you go through here, everything hard and difficult is going to make, adding these layers of joy and peace and satisfaction onto the state you get into when you get into that heavenly community and that heavenly home. And that's where life actually is. Because again, you spend 100 years here, you're going to spend thousands and thousands of years. You're going to be like those people from the golden age who are still loving what they're doing every second. That's
when your life starts. When you get there, when you get home, that's when it really gets going, and now it's good. And I'm thinking of another biblical story that connects with this, that the children of Israel, they were enslaved in the land of Egypt, and they got out of there, and then they're starving, and they're thirsty, and they're grumbling, and they want to go back, and it's a mess, and they're not having a good time. And then when they look back on it, at some point, there's this verse in there that says, we were carried on eagle's wings. They look back and say, no, that whole story was like the right things were happening at every stage,
Yeah. Yep. That you're not, there's not a lack of concern. It's not like God, oh yeah, shoot! you had a terrible life?
I didn't realize. You were in Egypt. Sorry, I forgot.
I had so many other people. I've got a lot of projects, a lot of balls in the air. Sorry about that. You kind of got pinched in the gears, but what a machine I built here. Because that's what it feels like. Again, I think that when the curtain is pulled back and you see the love that was there the whole time, God is taking care, but at every step of your life, there's angels around you. Even that community that you're going to join someday, like they know that you are there and that you're coming. Like they're waiting for you there. And sometimes people even that you knew in your life who have died, they're in the same community as you, and they're going to welcome you in. I think about
that's right,
like relatives and people I knew that have died and are in the heaven. I think like, oh yeah. I wonder if they're like kind of in the community I'm going to be in, and they're like getting stuff ready, and I'm going to get to see them. I'm going to get to see them.
And sometimes when you're in a state of deep thought, as Swedenborg says, you appear there. They can see you for a little while, so they may have already seen you.
Well, and it could be that as all of you faithfully were willing to sit through quite a long talk about this, if you were thinking about what we were talking about and thinking about communities in heaven, it may be that for a second there, you got a little more visible to your heavenly community that's going to come and welcome you, and like is building your house for you, or like knows that you're coming. So maybe they just got to know you a little better over this time.
What a sweet thought.
Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks Jonathan for hosting. It's been super fun, and we'll talk to you guys next time.